Welcome. My name is Allison Merker Garner, and this video is about somatic experiencing. If you are a teacher or a performer or some other creative, this is useful information for you. It will offer you ways that you can rebalance, restore, reset in a given moment, or as a practice that you use every single day to train your nervous system to respond to stress in a way that is more supportive of your well-being. If you're a teacher, you will learn some things that are helpful to you in what you see in your studio. If you have a teenager or a very little one acting out in a certain way, you'll be better able to be flexible with that, or set boundaries with that, or speak to it. So let's begin. What is somatic experiencing? Somatic experiencing developed about 40, 50 years ago by a man named Peter Levine. What he discovered was the flight, flee, freeze, faint. There are many different words that we have now become very familiar with, and what our nervous system does when it feels threatened. His work inspired many other people, those that were movement specialists, those that were psychotherapists, those that were Feldenkrais people, those that were practitioners in other fields, and the work of Steve Porges and polyvagal theory. So a lot of the work that Peter Levine did 40, 50 years ago has developed. And this development is the place from which we're going to be working. So what is somatic experiencing then? Soma refers to the body. So somatic experiencing is experiencing what the body experiences. Why is that important to us? Even as infants, we have responses to our environment. We have feeling responses, we have physical responses, we have thought responses, and those responses are translated through our neural system. There's neural circuitry that goes to all of our organs, to all of our muscles, to our brain, to our feelings, to all sorts of parts of us that we learn through adaptation from a very young age, what is safe and what is not safe in our environment. So some of us have learned to adapt in ways that do not support our well-being. We grew up in a place that was not supportive of that, or was not supportive of our safety. And so we developed ways of being that got us through. We were able to survive it. Others of us may have had wonderful backgrounds, and our neural systems are much more regulated or stabilized, but we still have adapted to a work environment or a relationship we've had or some other influence that has caused us to disconnect from what is best for us. So in this video, we will just do a few practices and a few experiences that will allow you to understand how to reconnect to your body. Why is that so important? Because if you do not do that, a couple of things can happen. One, you don't process material that comes in. You skin your knee as a 5-year-old and you are scooped up and taken in and a Band-Aid placed on that knee, and there's no opportunity for you to stop and orient and resource and kind of take it in and process it. Does it mean your parents did anything wrong? It just means that there was something in that response that was not allowed to happen. And if you have a number of these kinds of experiences, these aren't trauma experiences. The somatic experiencing does address trauma. You don't have to have big T trauma to benefit from work with the body. So oftentimes, the body reflects what we don't consciously know we're experiencing. So it's not disconnected from the brain or from our awareness, but implicitly we're responding in a certain way because we've adapted a certain way to our environment. And even though the environment might change, our adaptation, our reaction doesn't. It's where triggers often come from. It's unprocessed material that's built up over a period of time. So another thing that somatic experiencing really supports is self-led behavior. What does that mean? It means that the exercises that we do, what I call resourcing exercises, are very useful in being able to go inward, to develop the stillness within yourself to listen. And that listening may be becoming aware of some tension in your shoulders. It may be a sense that I'm feeling really tired right now, or I'm feeling very frightened. You may not have been conscious of that until you took the time to look inward. These kinds of exercises develop and build on that relationship you have with yourself so that you're not buffeted about by your environment. You're not thrown into this situation and that situation without any sense of self-driving yourself, self-agency. And why is that important? Because you get to choose freedom when you know what you're experiencing and connecting with that. So I want to pull up a couple of screen shares. This first one here, well, actually, let's do this one first. This one comes from Dan Siegel and his interpersonal neurobiology mindsight work. And what you see here is a graph where in the center we have what's called the window of tolerance. That's where we're self-led. That's where we're regulated. That's where we're not disassociated in some way or disconnected. We're fully present in the moment, but we're not way up here anxious and worried and stressed out or overly hyper and excited, nor are we down here where we feel immobilized or stuck. We're right here in the middle. So when Peter Levine talked about the threat responses that we can experience, they can be threat responses that cause us to want to run out of the room, or they can be threat responses that make us feel like we just want to put the covers over our head. There are different types of threat responses. And in the work that I do, I take the neural circuitry that's related to that response, and we work together to rewire that response to something that is more supportive of you. So if you have an adaptation, if you've had the kind of environment where there's a lot of drama, you're probably up here in the hyperactivation mode. You probably overreact to things. And I shouldn't use the word overreact. You react very, very strongly to things. It's what you've learned. And that's what you've learned to to do, and that's how you interact with the world. So our work together would look at the neural circuitry that's behind that reaction and bring it down to the window of tolerance where you can recognize it, choose a different behavior or response, and come to a place that's more serving your well-being. Similarly, if you're somebody that feels stuck and immobilized, you're down here. Perhaps when you were growing up or you had a relationship or a job situation that developed an adaptation where you just kind of disassociated. You just pulled away from it and went into yourself to a point where you weren't even aware of what was going on around you. You did that to protect yourself. This can also observed as a threat reaction that we look at those neural circuitry to bring you back to the window of tolerance. This is an oversimplification, of course, but this gives you an idea of how the approach works. So this part, this line, indicates how we might be during a given day. We don't stay in one place. No one stays in one place. We want to know what direction we're going in. Are we going into escalation? Are we going into immobility? Where are we going? Are we moving toward the window of tolerance? That's ideal. So this is an important place to recognize as something that we're not always going to be in that, but we want to be moving toward that. We want to be moving in that direction. And resourcing practices support our window of tolerance. They not only place us, widen that so that we become more tolerant, more able to stay present and calm in more and more stressful situations. So it, with practice, starts to expand. So the tree people out in my backyard right now are making a racket. It doesn't bother me. But there was a time where I wouldn't be able to focus. There was a time in my past where I would be really activated by that. But it's just out there somewhere. I'm aware of it without having to interact with it because I'm self-led. I get to choose, and I choose not to be thrown by it. So that's one thing that I wanted you to see. The other thing I wanted you to see is the types of resourcing we can do in somatic experiencing. So we can ground, which means we connect with our environment. So we start with inside, and we connect our awareness of ourselves to our environment in a way that's supportive. So here's a practice for grounding. Take a moment, get yourself comfortable. You can have your eyes open or closed. And bring your awareness to your breath. Bring your awareness to the inhale and the exhale of your breath. And as you take a few breaths, settle into wherever you're sitting, lying, reclining, standing, and bring your attention to where you have contact with something else, something that's supporting you, that's holding you up. It may be a chair, it may be the floor. just bring your attention to where you're being supported, where you have contact with your environment physically. And in that experience, allow yourself to move from that recognition and awareness. My cat is getting into things. And start to get curious about it. Where else do I have contact with the chair I'm sitting in? Maybe it's your lower back, the backs of your legs. And in doing that, what does that experience give you? You may notice some tension. You may notice some discomfort. And I apologize for the sound in the background because that is my cat wanting some attention. But once again, I'm choosing not to let it throw me. Next, we have orient. So if we were in this thing and we started to look around and see where the door is in the room that you're sitting in, or where the windows are. Maybe you're aware of someone else in the house, the cat in the room, what's going on outside. Orienting means that you are looking around and seeing what's around you, and often where you can exit. So think about that little girl that fell down and skinned her knee. She first grounds herself by assessing her injury. Where's somebody to help me? Where am I? And then comes the resourcing. When we start to connect by grounding and orienting, we start to feel a sense of ourselves as being part of our environment. It's non-dualistic. We are one with it. We have a self, but in resourcing, that self can expand into our environment. It can choose the safety and security that we need. So a child that's just skinned her knee may resource by finding a caregiver to help her. Or she may assess that her knee's not that bad and she can get back up on that bike and continue to ride. In resourcing, she has the opportunity to assess her situation and find safety in it. And when we widen that, that's widening the window of tolerance. Maybe she gets so accustomed to falling off her bike that it doesn't throw her anymore, and she doesn't need to go through the grounding and the orienting and the resourcing. But it becomes less of an upset. So as you're sitting and grounding and orienting and resourcing, you can widen your window of tolerance by becoming aware of something that may be a little activating for you. And you challenge yourself. Does that really need to be something that I respond to? So in our resourcing exercises and somatic experiencing, this is the process that we take. This is natural. It's what our nervous system is designed to do. But we've often forgotten that, or we've adapted where we don't give ourselves that. Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Don't be a crybaby. You don't need to stop and cry over your knee. You're fine. Go play. Don't make a big to-do. So there's not the opportunity to have the response, right? It's important that that child come to a point where they decide, or she decides, or he decides that it's all right, that I'm okay. And then that reparation happens. So in somatic experiencing, having some basic awareness of this process is helpful when we are working with ourselves. If we're working with a friend, or we have a relationship with someone, colleague, child. If we are a teacher and we have students and their parents that we are interacting with, what's really helpful is understanding that their nervous system is going through its stuff as well. So if I have a student that comes in and a parent, and I can tell right away there's stress, I can respond to it, I can feel it in me. But I have a wider window of tolerance. I can bring it back down to where it needs to be for my well-being. The child may be having a first lesson. If he's really little, he may be opening closet doors. He may be going through things that I have out and playing with him. What is he doing? He's trying to orient himself. He's trying to regulate himself. He's trying to find something in his environment that he can interact with and feel safe. So you as a teacher, knowing that, have some choices. If it's activating to you, you do need to set a boundary. But if it's not activating to you, if you can say, okay, I can be all right with this today, to allow him the opportunity to orient, to resource himself, to feel safe in this space where I teach. That's very, very useful, because then you realize this isn't something that's threatening you. And a parent that comes in and they don't know what's expected of them, perhaps, or they're worried that their child is not acting right or misbehaving in some way. So they're worried about their child's behavior, and they're activated for that reason. So your presence of being very connected with yourself and being able to see this, you can reassure them. It's okay. You don't need to worry. Your child is fine. And you are welcome to sit here, and you are welcome to join us in this lesson. Whatever you need to do to welcome them and reassure them that there is not a threat. You're not going to get angry. You're not going to think badly of them or their child. So just knowing a little bit of somatic experiencing can help you identify that. And if you have a really activated child, there are things you can do to settle him. Or if you have a very disassociated child, you have ways of bringing them to the moment that would not be. But the important thing is that they have to come to it. You can't enforce it. You cannot throw it at them as an expectation. If you're understanding that you're bringing them to the window of tolerance and where they're regulated, then you can see that that has to come from them. And you can do things to get them there, to give them the reassurance or the support or the direction. Because a lot of children, they can't self-regulate. They do need an adult to help them. So, and I know some adults that way too. So we all have our stuff. So this is somatic experiencing. The best way I want you to think about this is something that Dan Siegel refers to, that we have not one brain, but three. We have the brain we call a brain. We have a brain that resides in our hearts, and we have the brain that resides in our gut. We spend all of our time here, but the compassion, the love, is just as important and should be integrated with what's in here. And so our work together involves self-led work, and not just self-led work, but strengthening this. If you have any questions,